So this is the architecture of what the demo is going to be today. And I'll just walk through us one piece at a time. At the edge, like we talked about, the groov epics from Opto 22 are on the C stores, and they have the C store logic inside them. Each store is modeled as a single UDT, and those groov epics are connected up to equipment and streaming that information back. They end up streaming it to an MQTT server. That server is sitting, in our case, in the cloud as part of a larger infrastructure here, but that server can be anywhere. That's part of the IoT infrastructure in this case for this demo. The UNS as well is contributed to from everything connecting up to that MQTT server. We'll show that off in just a minute here. 4IR provides the infrastructure that's sitting inside the cloud. So you have Ignition in the cloud there. That could be Ignition Cloud Edition, or that could be standard versions of Ignition that are running in the cloud. Feature set's the same, or it can be between those. We'll run inside AWS and Azure, as you can see. And the important part here is this is where the Ignition screens that you're about to see are sitting. This is where the basic visualization is happening. This is what's serving out the clients and serving out any mobile devices that might be taking a look at this. It's a SQL database that's sitting inside that infrastructure there. And 4IR has a few additional pieces in their standard infrastructures that they spin up as well. To keep this simplistic, I wanted to show the main highlights and the pieces that are the most important for our demo here today. Now, on top of this is where Sepasoft and SepaIQ is happening. They're connected up to that same MQTT server and connected to the same UNS and pulling information from there. They're running Ignition locally and the SepaIQ application as well. So when Mark shows that off, he'll be pulling from the exact same data, exact same structure, exact same namespace, that same UNS that's being used for the whole demo here. And just as a side note, other additional applications can connect up and use this UNS as well. So for example, Cirrus Link has a bridge for Snowflake. And if you're connecting up Snowflake, that would connect straight to that MQTT server. There's 100 logos that I could have put here for showing off the other pieces that can connect straight up to that MQTT infrastructure and get access to this unified namespace. With that said, I'm going to hop right over to a quick demonstration, and I will see if, excellent. So this is Ignition running, and I'll switch back and forth between the architecture diagram and the actual demo here, but this is Ignition running where it says Ignition in the cloud there. This is running from that server. I happen to be a client that is connecting up there. And if I take a look at this, right here, these are my tag providers, and this is my UNS, the Unified Namespace. Now, we had a lot of questions before this webinar, folks asking us information about how do I set up a UNS, where does this actually live? We'll get to a number of those questions afterward. Also, as a side note, as you have questions as we go through this demonstration, please feel free to add those questions directly to the GoToWebinar panel there. So you have a questions panel, please feel free to use that. Inside this UNS, we have, in our case, Epic C stores that are connected here, but this UNS could be built out of anything. And so some folks end up building their UNS out of an ISA 95 style model where it might have a region. It might start with a country, or it might just start with a region, and then it might start with an actual location. So you can have US, and then you can have California and some other things there. Other folks do it more organizationally from structure of the things that they're tracking. And this company, for example, might have multiple things in addition to C stores. There could be a lot of other information that's sitting here in the root of the UNS as well. And so the choice here was to have the C stores that are sitting directly in here. Under that section, it has a number of different folders. So there's, of course, supplies that are going to the C stores. There's transactions that are happening inside here that might be fed off to an accounting system. The stores themselves have a lot of real-time data that are streaming back and forth. And so this whole UNS will go into in a little bit more detail here in a few minutes. but I wanted to give you a bit of background as to what we're publishing into and what Vincent's pieces will be connecting to here. And quick view of some visualization of that. We have a couple of C stores that are sitting near our offices here. This is one that's in Folsom. So we can see here that the convenience store has a lot of different features to it. This is the Epic panel that's happening right now that's on the C-store and collecting data and sending it back. We have car wash, freezer, fuel systems. We can see how the HVAC is doing. And once again, we'll switch back to this in a minute. But this gives you a quick view of that data coming in, actually being accessible, being able to be used, shown off, demonstrated, and then later on analyzed. So with all that said, Vincent, I will go ahead and pass this over to you at this point. So I'm making you presenter, and that should give you the ability to share your screen.
Great. Let's see if make sure I can get the right screen here, which is always a challenge. And let me know if you guys are seeing my screen.
Yes, we are, Benson. I think I would take just a moment to answer a quick question that came in. We've had a couple, but this one's a really quick one. Just curious why you're showing the UNS inside perspective instance. Is Ignition the UNS in this case? And the answer is no, Ignition's not the UNS. In perspective, it's real easy to show it off. You can show it off inside the Ignition Designer as well. We just figured that it would be a little easier to demonstrate in a way that was showing some of the tag values there. And I'll show a little bit more there. But the UNS is part of everything that's contributing to it. And then MQTT server, you connect something else, you're going to get that exact same structure. That same UNS is going to be accessible everywhere, regardless of if the client is Ignition or something else. All right, Vincent, back over to you.
Great. And then let's see, we have one of the C stores up. And what you see there, of course, is the Model C store. And for one of the things that for anybody, say, who went to ICC last September, these may look familiar to you. They are the same demo units that we put together for the Build-a-thon. So these are real, there's real I/O on there, real sensors, actuators, all of that. And Terry, if you'll go ahead and turn on an additional location, there we go. And this, of course, now is the C-store here in Temecula. So one of the things I want to do is we'll come back over here to our map, and you can see that I've got those C-stores already in there. But what I want to do is add a new one. And because the customer's objective was to be able to scale quickly, I want to show you how we're going to be able to add a store real quickly down here into Temecula. So to do that, the first thing I'm going to do is actually log into that C store that's going to be the darker one in your live video. And I'm going to do that here with this screen and actually log into the Epic. And I am doing this over a VPN connection, and it is secure. So I do need to put in a username and password because everything on the system is account-based. So here's my accounts, and I can go and manage my local users. One of those, Benson here, I just logged in with. But those are accounts on the local device. You can also manage your accounts centrally using LDAP. And that might run also up in the FactoryStack server. So a lot of different ways to manage access to this device. As I described, we've got I/O cards right there on the Epic, and it's tied to all the sensors, actuators, levels, temperatures, and so on. And then we have a control program running in there as well that is managing and controlling all the subsystems in the store. Now, a couple of quick points. You'll notice that this is a completely web-based interface for managing the Groov Epic and all of its services. It also is where we manage all of our security. So I have my web server certificates and all the tools required to create certificates, upload, update certificates, all that's built in. And as I mentioned, we also have a built-in firewall. So for all the services that are running on the Epic, I can then manage access to the Epic through that firewall on various network interfaces. And speaking of network interfaces, very quickly, we'll take a look at the status of the network on this system. And we have multiple IP network space. This is within the store. So anything we're communicating is completely segmented from this other Ethernet interface. And this is my outbound access to the internet and therefore to the Ignition up on FactoryStack, the MQTT broker, the OpenVPN server, all of that is outbound. And then of course you see that my OpenVPN client has connected to the VPN server, and that's why from this screen, I can get in here and manage this device remotely. Great. There's a lot more in Groov Epic that, of course, I don't have time for in this webinar, so we're going to jump right into Ignition. And indeed, Ignition, in this case, Ignition Edge, is turned on and it's completely built into the system. So you literally just turn it on and Ignition is ready to go. And then I can hyperlink to open Ignition into a new tab, which I've done here. So I'm going to go ahead and log in. I'm going to go right to config and log in to Ignition Edge running on the Epic. So I'll do so here. Ignition has its own set of credentials, so I'll go ahead and enter those in. And the first thing we want to understand is, well, how did Ignition Edge get all the tag data from my control program and its I/O? Well, that couldn't be simpler. The beauty of Ignition is it is an OPC client, and the Epic is an OPC UA server. So we just made a quick connection there between Ignition Edge and the OPC server built into the Epic. So pretty slick. So what do the tags look like? So I'm going to switch now over to the Ignition Edge Designer, and we know it's Edge because there's a little green icon up here. That usually gives us an indication that we're working in Edge. And indeed, here are all my tags. They're all coming in. Now, I could have just done OPC tags here, but because we want to be able to scale quickly, I've created a UDT definition that will work for all stores. So as I open that up, I can see all my tags, all my subsystems are set up there, and then I instantiate my tags in the main tag folder, and that's where I get to put in some parameters that allow me to model that data and also connect to any C-store that might be in the system. So pretty slick there that I can get all that, and as you can see, I'm already starting to build out the first part of my UNS infrastructure. Also, you'll notice here, I've been able to develop a local UI. So now for anybody that's in the C-store, they'll have a UI that's available right on the front of the Epic. And it's also available to, say, an HDMI monitor that's connected to the Epic, or from any mobile device that may be on the local network at the store. So this provides, again, some local UI. Really easy to build that there. This is a very simple example of what I've done there. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the Ignition Edge gateway, and here I am. Again, it's green, so I know I'm there. And the other part of this system, of course, is how we're going to get the data, all that modeled data that we've modeled at the edge, and move that up to the MQTT broker. So as you can see, I do not have it enabled yet. So at this moment, I'm not sending any data up to FactoryStack. And obviously, I'll be able to connect it here once I'm ready to show you how that's done. So a couple of things, I did set up a transmitter, and of course, that's set up here. I've got actually a couple of transmitters, but the one that we're working here with here is the webinar. And as you can see, I've got my Sparkplug IDs that identify what this system is. But here's an important one. I have a history store. And that means that when I'm connecting to the broker, should that connection fail for whatever reason, whether the system goes down or communications are failed, we are storing the data from the C-store locally. And then as soon as connections resume, I'm able to send all that historical data up. This is important because it means I'll never miss all of my C-store operational data. So very slick there as well. All right, now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come back over here to the servers, and under servers is really where's the place I'm sending this data? And there it is. That is the endpoint up on FactoryStack where I'll be sending all my data. And as you can see, I'm not currently connected. So we're going to go ahead and make that connection. But before I do, I'm going to jump over to the Ignition Designer up on FactoryStack. And again, orange icon, now I'm up on the full Ignition server, and I can see on MQTT Engine, I've got two stores. The two stores we're working with today, Eldorado Hills and Folsom. But now what I want to do is actually turn on the Temecula store and start seeing if we can populate that data. So I'm going to switch back to the Edge Gateway, go to General, and simply enable. Now at this moment, we're going to collect all that model data that we have at the edge, and we're going to start burping it up all through MQTT into the Ignition running on FactoryStack. This is a live demo, so we're hoping to see that information pop in here real quick, and there it is. Right here, we now have Temecula. So now we have all the C-store data from those modeled UDTs landing in FactoryStack in Ignition. Pretty slick, right? So let's see if it showed up on the map. So we're going to come back to the map, and boom, there it is. I've got my C-store. I can see my HVAC, kind of like what Kevin was showing for the Folsom store. In just a few clicks, we've added a brand new store to the entire architecture. So this is really important as we start thinking about things like scale and being able to bring stores up quickly. Of course, that was one of the objectives for our customer. All right, so now what I'm going to do is go back to perspective here. I'm sorry, we're gonna go back to the designer up on the ignition and FactoryStack. And here we are. And one of the things that we've done is we've used MQTT to move all the OT data up to this level, which is up on ignition, and it's all in Sparkplug, and that's wonderful. We got state, we've got store and forward, we got everything we need. But we haven't really talked about the UNS yet. So what I'm going to show you now is a new tag provider we've created that does describe, in our case, our contribution to the UNS. And as Kevin showed a moment ago, I've got my stores in here. There's California, there's El Dorado Hills, and there, of course, is now Temecula. So I can start adding other data to the UNS and manage all that right here from within Ignition. And as I add more things about supplies, transactions, anything that we need to know, we can all set this up into the UNS so we can publish it back out for others to consume. And let's talk about that real quick. I'm going to go back to my browser, and I'm going to actually log into the Ignition gateway through the gateway interface. And when I do so, and again, it's orange, so I know I'm on the main gateway. And let's try that one more time. This is a new feature that's in MQTT transmission running up on the main gateway in FactoryStack. And indeed, it is a UNS transmitter. So we're going to grab all the tags that we have in our new UNS tag provider, and we're going to transmit those back to the broker. Now that's pretty cool, because now we have another place in the broker where people can consume that data, and it's not necessarily Sparkplug data, and it's all follows the UNS. So just to give you an idea of what that looks like, I'm going to open up a free MQTT Explorer. You can download this for free from the internet. I've got a bunch of brokers in there. I'm going to scroll down to the FactoryStack one, and I'm going to connect. Now watch this. Suddenly, my UNS just shows right up here in this broker. All my stores are in there. There's Temecula, Folsom, El Dorado Hills. And in the Temecula C-store, I'm going to come down to the car wash and just take a look at the run status here. There you can see it. And everything is in JSON. That means anybody with permissions can consume this data. And look at that. We just turned on the car wash, and there you can start seeing the status of the car wash as it runs through the wash, rinse, dry, cycle, and then comes back to zero. So we've just democratized the data from added a Temecula store, democratized that data for anybody to consume. And my guess is that, Mark, you're probably ready to consume some of that data and do something interesting with it.
Yes, thank you, Vincent. Here, let's, there we go. Okay, yeah, so because Benson has exposed that data in the UNS, I'm able to consume that from the broker and start to do some calculations with that. And for this scenario, I try to put myself in the place of the C-store CEO. I realize that's a lot of C's, but I thought, hey, how can I grow this business? I focus on the car wash aspect of the business. So here at Ignition, we're seeing some calculations returned from SepaIQ. And I started by thinking, well, I want to track winners and losers, so I'm going to set up a leaderboard. In so doing, I realized, hey, I needed some additional context to that raw data. And so I was able to set up some additional calculated items and supplement the raw data coming in so that I could furnish those calculations, right? Now with that leaderboard information, then I can drive the business decisions, right? Where do I need staffing, advertising, and so forth. Now I focused on the El Dorado Hills location a little bit more than the others, probably because that's where our office is, but I started to look at capacity for the car wash, right? So tracking based on a vehicle ID, which I added to the context. Hey, where do we have open capacity? Again, by publishing that information back out to the UNS, other services can consume that information. Maybe we have a marketing automation platform that can target ads for that location for low usage hours, right? Where we have a lot of spare capacity, right? Well, as interesting as car washes are and calculations around car washes, a lot of the interesting stuff for me is behind the scenes, and I know we're really short on time, so just want to touch on a couple things real quick. For many, this is probably your first time seeing the SepaIQ interface. Notice this is the back end, right? So Ignition, fantastic front end. We're using Ignition, right? Democratizing that data and serving clients everywhere, right? SepaIQ is a back end tool for analytics. So we have the capability to organize our incoming data. That's what these groups are. We also can organize our requests or the analysis that we publish. We can also administer our machine learning models, whether they're trained locally or externally. Of course, we have connectivity, cluster management, and much more. I want to show two things real quick. One is the API that's built in. So everything we can do on screen, we can also access from the API. And that's really exciting for me because this community is moving in that direction with 8.3 and API administered configuration. So pretty cool for your deployment plans and expanding rapidly. Last thing I wanted to show real quick was the flexible nature of the structure for data. Here on the request builder screen, this is where I can lay out what kind of analysis I wish to publish and what kind of structure I want to apply to it. Obviously, I'm playing kind of loose here with individual locations, but then I used a roll-up feature to aggregate data from all locations. There's a nice feature to give it a test run right here before I publish it back out, over the MQTT broker, for instance. And you can see there's metadata around every execution. So I can see how long did it take? How many rows did I process, right? What's the metadata around the analysis? What are the results? Oh, you guys are clicking on the Folsom, the Folsom car wash. Y'all
We're sending a
are
lot of
sending it.
data to you, Mark.
Yeah, I love it. So of course, this is subscribed, so it's updating in real time, and my Ignition instance is also subscribed to SepaIQ to get those things right away. So we're we're over time on this part, so I'm going to hand it back to Kevin because he has more good stuff to show you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Mark. Really appreciate it. We had some really good questions come in here as well that I wanted to quickly answer, and then also to provide a little bit more detail on a couple of somewhat fundamental questions, and that could be from more of the group here as well. So there are a couple of questions just about UNSs in general. My screen should be popping back up here in just a second. And so one of the questions, well, a couple of the questions, can UNS be considered a version of tag taxonomy? And just wanted to make sure I'm understanding correctly, the MQTT broker is the UNS. Well, I decided to pull up the inductive automation definition of UNS from our What is a Unified Namespace article, which is simply a UNS is a standardized way to organize and name data, and it contains an enterprise's structure and events in one communication interface. So the organize and naming data is a tag taxonomy. That's another way to phrase that. And so that's an important part of UNS, but the other really important part is the accessibility, the democratization of that data, making it available to the entire organization. So it's those two pieces of the UNS, I think, are both very important. So it is a tag taxonomy, but I don't think you can have a properly built UNS without having a technology that properly shares it as well, makes it accessible, gives you a single source of truth. And the MQTT Sparkplug B structure allows for, devices like the Epic here to be able to automatically send those out, contribute to this UNS without having another server be the owner of the whole thing. So individual pieces can contribute to this overall company UNS that is used basically everywhere. So it's a really good way to do an implementation of UNS. It's not the only way, but our customers have seen a lot of success going that route. One other question that came in, and Benson, I think I'm going to throw this over to you, says, hello, I think of MQTT as a good protocol on IoT, but not as a replacement to OPC connecting to PLCs. But recently a client is asking us to use MQTT for all of the communications. And I'm starting to test this, but it doesn't seem easy to implement MQTT in the major PLC brands to work with Ignition? Are there some ways to connect them directly or just by using an edge device? What are the options there? So Benson, over to you for that question.
Sure. So yeah, it's a good question. And MQTT is like OPC in that it is a communication protocol to move between two endpoints. The big difference is if you have an OPC UA server, say in a PLC, then you may use an OPC client to pull that data in. The inverse is true for MQTT. Really what you have is on a device, let's say the Epic, it does support native MQTT, so it'll publish its data to a broker. So you can actually use them both simultaneously. And they work very well together. So in this case, it's really just a matter of, if you're in a plant floor, OPC usually works pretty well. But as you start to get into distributed environments, that's where MQTT really shines because again, it's publishing its data on change rather than OPC, which is, not necessarily scanning, but subscribing to tags in an end device. At the end of the day, it comes down to this. Does the PLC that you want to use support MQTT? If it does natively, then you're in good shape and you can use either, and it depends on the use case. If it doesn't support MQTT, then you probably will use an edge device, an edge gateway. Of course, Epic supports that as well. In fact, we have several demonstrations where we're connecting to Allen Bradley, Siemens, and other PLCs that don't have MQTT, but we pull that data into Ignition and then we publish that data out via MQTT. I hope that answered the question.
Thanks, Arlen. Appreciate it. We have a few more questions that have come in that I'll circle back to in just a minute here. But I wanted to wrap up things with the demo overall, just showing a couple more pieces of everything. So somebody did ask, this is somebody who knows Ignition, of course, asked, inside MQTT Engine, we have the edge nodes. We can have different things inside the edge nodes. Can I just build out a UNS this way, or am I missing something? So inside the edge nodes, there are a couple of requirements for the way that these actually show up. So you have to have a node, you have to have the node control and the info inside here. Those edge nodes also are taking the pieces that are, basically the first three pieces of the path are required to be published by the edge node. So you can't have an edge node. You're forced into this structure if you're not using a UNS or a separate provider for that, where you're going to have several in a row that are the first pieces instead of being able to publish into the root of a UNS, for example. So if you actually use the UNS features inside the MQTT modules, you can have a tag provider that is completely under your control, and you can publish to anywhere inside that tag provider. Of course, you don't want to have collisions where you're publishing the same tag name to the same place, and the modules do a good job at notifying you if there are collisions, so you can trace them down and take care of that. But basically, you can publish to anywhere inside this UNS. You're in full control if you're using the UNS features here. All right, so that said, going to jump back over. You can see that inside here, there's, I can remotely start. I'll do this one more time. You can see one of these moving along there from the cameras there. Freezer, I can see how the fuel system's running. And these are some screens that we put together for this demo. Now, of course, since there's a UNS, this isn't the only way to do these screens. Anybody could tap into this UNS, tap into the data streams, and create their own set of screens, create their own data, create their own analytics like Mark was just showing there. And in fact, we have some companies who did just that. So these were a couple of folks at our Ignition Community Conference who came in and did demonstrations directly they spent a couple of days building out applications based on this same set of data. So this is one from a company called DMC, they're a systems integrator based in the US. This is one that was created by a company called BIJC, systems integrator based out of the UK. You can't see it in this screenshot, but there's animations there. The waves at the bottom move as the rinse cycle goes on. And here's some information about pricing. They're pulling in historical pricing as well. They've got charts and graphs that relate to all of that. And so it all builds off of the data that is available inside this UNS. And just a quick summary of what we were able to achieve here as we're getting close to the end of our time. But the Epic stores, basically inside this demo, what we were showing off and what we tried to demonstrate and hopefully did a pretty good job on is that you could see how the application empowered the Epic C Stores organization to reach the goals. able to enhance efficiency, streamline operations with making data accessible everywhere, having that data flow up to a central place, being able to analyze it across all of the different locations, and have those locations be completely dynamic, where new stores coming online immediately are discovered, available, accessible inside the applications with no additional work needed, no additional integration work needed. It's done once, and then it's basically reused everywhere automatically by systems that understand UNS. I'll mention a couple of other things and we'll get to a few more questions here. So this really brings our demonstration to a close, but the webinar here wouldn't be complete without me mentioning something about the upcoming 8.3 release. We have Ignition 8.3. It's going to include a new event streams module. That event streams module is going to give a powerful new way to centrally manage event-driven data from a whole variety of sources. If you're developing applications inside Ignition and you're processing events, tag changes, new things that are happening that you want to process in a standardized way, changes coming from the outside, people pressing buttons even, if you want to manage that centrally, event streams are a great way to process those events from a centralized management standpoint. It's also great for connecting up to event streaming technologies to be a stream processor for things like Kafka streams that are coming from the outside. So a lot of companies, IT departments, are using systems like Kafka or other message queuing systems that event streams can be great at processing and interacting with and sending data back over those. Perspective module has a new drawing editor, new form generator, form component offline mode, which is going to be really nice for companies that do paper forms and don't have connectivity remotely. You'll be able to use Perspective. You can create applications that do that. And then there's an additional set of functionality inside the gateway. We've made everything RESTful. Everything is web services, so you can program against the gateway. We moved everything to disk, so it's very friendly for source control tools. We added a whole slew of IT-focused features, security-focused features, and there's a lot more there. Feel free to check out our website, some of our previous webinars as well, if you want some more details there, some information from ICC this last year. Lots and lots of great features. We're extremely excited about 8.3. And if you liked the things that you saw today, I'd also want to say, let's team up and advance digital transformation, right? Advance this concept of unified namespace. We're very excited about it. Hope you are too. You can learn more about all of the partners, our website there under Partner Solutions. We'll send out links after the webinar here too.